Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the Dungeon Masters Guild and tabletop RPG space. And this week, I am joined by Benjamin Huffman of the Sterling Vermin.
Hello, very nice to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming. How are we doing this afternoon?
Good. I finished WandaVision today, which was a very emotional start to my day. But then I did some writing, and now I'm here. So that's a good day overall.
Kick the episode off straight with the heavy spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, I can say there's been such a buzz around WandaVision that I must admit I've kind of been holding off until the whole thing is out.
It's out now,
so that's what I mean. So luckily, I've managed to avoid any of the big spoilers. But I think now this coming weekend, I think I'm just gonna become a potato and binge it.
There you go. It's worth it.
No, fantastic. Well, let's segueing into the meat and potatoes. Speaking about potatoes, what sort of thing what sort of things are you known for in your DMsGuild and surrounding tabletop RPG space?
Yeah, so the big things I'm known for is my blog, which is the Sterling Vermin Adventuring Company, just Sterling Vermin for short. Although I'm kind of doing an update soon, that's going to transition into a website that will have a blog, but there'll be more there. But then apart from that, and maybe even bigger than that, the thing I'm known for is the Pugilist Class. That is a class I wrote back in 2016 during the early days of the guild and really took off. But then I've got several other classes, and I think people really think of me as like a player's option kind of guy. So classes and archetypes for existing classes.
So my first kind of question off the bat, so where did the Sterling Vermin come from? Where did that? Because
it's actually yeah. So that's actually the name of the adventuring company founded by my first 5e character. So I was playing in a campaign, and I have a really awful, I guess would say, habit of needing to do wordplay on everything. So my character was a guy named Mouse who had silver hair, and he had forgotten his identity. He himself had a mouse named Anani. So there's all sorts of like Anani mouse, silver-haired vermin, Sterling Vermin, like just a bunch of like circular jokes that went nowhere. And anyway, Sterling Vermin Adventuring Company was the name of his adventuring company, and so
I do love these sort of like the adventurers who kind of go off and be like, you know what, I could do it, or I could just like start my own company and get into the franchising and what's kind of great.
I never thought about it as franchising. That's a hilarious idea.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say it's always a case of like in the future, like if as the world kind of develops, you would have like adventuring people part of the Sterling Vermin adventuring company, like no, we've been working there for about 3 years, kind of working through the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
Although I think that's essentially the whole like inspiration behind was it Acquisitions Incorporated?
Yeah, right.
Adventuring, corporatizing everything.
Yeah.
No, interesting. And so you mentioned, so was it the Pugilist, like that was kind of kicked everything off for you then?
Yes, I mean that has done really huge numbers, and I mean, it was big, I think, before it was even on the DMsGuild, although it blew up a lot more when it was on the DMsGuild. But that was a class that maybe a year or two prior to the DMsGuild even being a thing, I started writing and producing stuff on Reddit and getting feedback. And so the class already had a huge following on Reddit before I published it on DMsGuild. But then it did really well on DMsGuild, and then it was featured on Matt Colville's show for like, well, I won't get spoilers. It was featured for some time on Matt Colville's show, and there was another big pickup there. I think the only other class to be an adamantine seller on DMsGuild is Blood Hunter. So it's me and Matt Mercer, and I don't really have Matt Mercer's clout, so I'm going to take this as a pretty big win.
It's good company to be in, I'll be honest.
Yeah, it is.
Speaking as another Matt.
Yeah.
No, so I guess what was kind of the impetus then? So like what like was there like a design void that you were trying to like fill that you felt the other classes didn't cover that you wanted? I'm curious, like where did the inspiration kind of come from?
So there were a few things. First was that the monk class kind of made me uncomfortable a little bit. I just from like I want to say politically correct because that's a very loaded phrase.
Yeah.
But basically from the standpoint of being politically correct, the monk class just feels like let's just throw a bunch of like stereotypes into a class, and because it's got a historic basis in D&D, it'll get a pass. So I didn't feel super comfortable with the monk class in the game, but I liked the idea of there being an unarmed fighter. Every other class that could become an unarmed fighter would have to wait till 3rd level, and that's like, okay, so I'm a fighter who swings a sword and uses a shield, and then at 3rd level I'm suddenly like, screw this stuff, I'm just gonna punch people. That didn't make any sense. So it had to be somebody that started fist fighting from 1st level, and there's basically no way to do that apart from writing a whole new class. As I got into it, though, it did, the really rich kind of narrative tradition of pugilists and fist fighters. I kind of opened my eyes to that, and there was so much stuff. There were so many kind of characters that weren't properly expressed or couldn't be properly expressed in D&D without a class like this. So that was one thing. And then a big thing I was thinking about as I was working on the Pugilist class was that this was a class that was specifically going to be about being a low class as an economically low class hero. Because the game, there's a lot of classes that you presume must be like high class people, because like who can afford plate mail, who can afford to buy a spell book and all the like ink that requires to, so like these are all really rich people. So I also kind of wanted something that did kind of felt like a hero of the masses.
No, I think you must be, you raised some really good points about like the monk class in particular, because even in some of the kind of monks that I've played in the past, I've always done like, what feels like a reskinning, stuff like that, of sort of thing where it's like it's the monk abilities, but it's like for this sort of like, I don't know, this rough and tumble detective that I'm playing as, it's not quite the same. So I can see why the kind of they kind of push towards that sort of like, just I'm just going to start throwing fists and kind of see what happens. I'm curious then. So building a class all around about like literally just fist fighting, then what do you think was like the biggest sort of design challenge behind it? Because I mean, like immediately what comes to mind is like, I imagine punching doesn't necessarily always scale well. Like tier 20, you're fighting gods, and you're just like, let's go.
Well, what I originally envisioned for this class was that I thought maybe it would be cool if I ran with this idea of variant classes, which the original idea I had in my head was just a class that was new, but it was just a slightly, you just changed enough from an existing class to be its own thing. And that's how the Pugilist started. Now, it eventually got changed so much that I don't think it fit that original idea I had of variant classes anymore. But there's still, like, generally the way its damage scales is similar to the way a monk's damage scales. But I also was a big fan of 4E, and so you also see some 4E mechanics get kind of stealth dropped into Pugilist, in particular the bloodied condition. Pugilists want to get the crap beat out of them because they get more powerful once they've gotten the crap beat out of them, which also fits into that, I feel like, fictional kind of archetype in your mind of the fighter who's like on the ropes and then dominates and wins.
The Captain America, like I can go all day.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, that's kind of incredible. And so I must admit, so how, again, so I always like asking these questions with people who are kind of like around during the inception of like DMsGuild and stuff. How did you find, like, I guess because I feel at least when it comes to Reddit is a very interesting community, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. And I know that, again, from at least my experience and stuff, I know that sometimes Reddit is quite standoffish to I guess what it deems as homebrew content. Obviously it varies in the communities and stuff like that. But how did you find that sort of, like, I guess the transition from going from getting feedback from Reddit to with DM's Guild coming along and.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not on Reddit too much anymore for a lot of reasons. Some of which are those kind of interesting, whatever you want to look.
Yeah.
Yeah. Characteristics of the population there. But one thing that actually was really helpful about Reddit is because they hate homebrew. They hate what you're doing so much, so they're going to do everything they can to tear it down.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can kind of separate your ego from the feedback and just hear what they hate, then you kind of, I mean, not everything, because some people will come in and just be like, this whole thing is trash. This is the most overpowered thing I've ever seen in my life. Or this is the most underpowered thing I've ever seen in my life. I mean, frequently something will get both comments.
I guess it's like, like you're filtering through diamonds in the rough to try and find, I guess, constructive criticism, which
exactly.
Again, yeah.
And it's important because if somebody likes your stuff, they're more willing to overlook the flaws or the sort of things that aren't quite clicking. Whereas if somebody hates you, hates your stuff, hates what you stand for, they're happily gonna spew whatever bile. But somewhere in that bile, there might be like a good point. And so it's, to some extent, going to Reddit was about cycling through all of that kind of just reflexive disdain to find, well, like 5 people said this, so maybe there's something to that. I got to think about that.
And I must admit, there is something about the nature of Reddit that they these sort of armchair game designers of balance, like they will literally find the edge cases of like, this is broken if you have this if you take like 3 multi classes and 9 times out of 10 it's like, if you multi class warlock, this breaks.
Yeah, I've also found that they'll say things like that they'll say stuff like that, and then but like in their description it's very clear that they've misunderstood like some basic component of the rules, and just like, what do I do with that? Like, I'm not going to argue with you about whether or not this works when you don't even understand the game.
So how did you find out about the DMsGuild?
Well, so primarily I was on D&D Next and Unearthed Arcana, and I think Unearthed Arcana was a pretty big deal around Unearthed Arcana, particularly because it's really strange. On most D&D subreddits, they hate homebrew or hate people who would call themselves a game designer when they're doing homebrew. But on Unearthed Arcana, at least at that time, and one of the reasons why I don't really post there anymore, they were also very strongly against anybody becoming a professional game designer. So on the subreddit for game design in D&D, there was this big pushback of like, you can't promote anything here. Nothing you ever publish here can be published on the DMsGuild. Like, nothing you get feedback on here can be published on the DMsGuild at any point in the future, because that would be so mean to people if you did that. Like, how dare you ask for money for the work that you do? I mean, I had one moderator from Unearthed Arcana at that time follow me around to different subreddits, like just trash talking me on all my threads, and it was just like, at that point I actually just kind of was off Reddit for a couple of years. Now I have my own subreddit that I like drop links in, but that's about it.
So it was, I guess, the kind of slowly, as the DMsGuild has grown considerably, I imagine, since the sort of easing away from Reddit was probably enjoyable for you, at least in some parts.
Yes and no. I mean, I really liked all the feedback, even especially because I felt vindicated. Like, I mean, people would talk whatever trash and then be like, oh, well, it's selling really incredibly well and everybody else loves it, so I mean, that's fine, I guess. If you but it probably better for my mental health to be away from a environment like that.
It's interesting. It's kind of weird that you kind of have that's this snapshot in time of like the emergence of DMsGuild and kind of being one of the creators that were kind of around beforehand. To talk a little bit more broadly then, kind of like around all your kind of character options, everything you kind of do. Is there any sort of like is there like a trend to like how your creative process starts, or like where your ideas come from?
Well, I mean, I've been into like fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons specifically since I was like 10, which is closing in on like 30 years ago. And so like often I just go back to like things I wanted to be in the game as a kid that now I can put in the game if I want. Like I think in the complete Arcanist handbook that a friend of mine and I released, Russ Leiser, I hope is this how you pronounce his last name. Um, uh, I released a bard class or a bard archetype that has a puppet. And as a kid, for some reason, I just always really liked the idea of like somebody who fought with a puppet alongside them.
Yeah.
So now it's in the game.
Yeah, no, I can imagine like there's so many ways you can go with that. You can go like the creepy end of the spectrum, or you can go the very sort of like it's a Muppet. This person just has
yeah. No, I have always had a weird to digress. I've always had a weird kind of love of puppets and dolls and stuff, be it horror, straight up fantasy, anything like that. And I don't even really like puppets themselves that much. Like I'm just whatever, but specifically like in a fantasy or horror context, I'm like, yes, please, more.
I don't know. See, again, to tangent off of your tangent, I think I'm kind of alright with puppets, but as a child, anyone sort of like, I don't know what to call them, but they're sort of like people like mascots. Essentially, like Disneyland,
right?
Or something like that.
Yeah.
I have a strict memory of being in Disneyland as a young child, being chased by Chicken Little, which I don't know. Thankfully, I haven't kind of again. That's probably an avenue for me to take that suffering and fear as a child, and I can turn it into something. And so there's an incoming mascot subclass or adventure. So it's literally just like from all these sort of from anything from martial to kind of arcanist. It's just like I kind of want to dabble in this area, and you just kind of run with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of just like daydreaming and stuff too. I mean, like my process is I write a bunch of stuff down in a notebook, and kind of once something hits a critical mass of like I have enough thoughts or ideas about this, then that's when I start developing it.
I'm curious about, so obviously looking at your catalog, you have done a fair chunk of sort of player options, but you've also kind of done again, is it Keep of the Kobold Queen?
That's right.
And stuff like that. So I'm curious, is there any reason why you've kind of just felt like, well, okay, two-part question. Number one is like, so why player options? Why do you feel like you gravitate towards that? And second, why step out of that comfort zone now?
Yeah. So the first question, answer to the first question is that it's, I think, what I'm good at. I'm much better at where game design meets story than just the story part, which I think of adventures as like being like 20% game design, 80% story. I've also I think I've run like maybe one adventure from a book ever in my life. Like that's not how I play, and so I don't even know. I mean, I for when I wrote Keep the Kobold Queen, I had to like research how written adventures even work because I didn't know. So that's why the focus on player options. I mean, secondarily, there was also the fact that in my opinion, I believe player options sell much better than adventures. And if you think about it, there's like 5 players for every one DM or something. So, I mean, like you've got 5 people to sell to instead of 1. So there's that kind of bonus too. But that's secondary to the fact that I just think I'm better at writing player options, and I have maybe I'm slightly stronger as a game designer than a writer. So that's just feels like the natural place for me to be. And then why go out of that? Because I want to be a better writer. I would like to get good at it. And there's also kind of whole products. Products is such an awful word.
Yeah.
There's whole projects that I want to do or be involved in that don't have anything to do with game design, or where game design is a much smaller part of that. There was Keep of the Kobold Queen. There was also Infamous Adversaries, which was a project I led, and I wrote a few entries in it, but it was a pretty big collaboration. And those are projects that I think are really exciting and fun to work on and to have done, even if they're not as easy for me. I mean, like I could probably write like an archetype for a class if you really pushed me in like 2-3 hours if I really had to. But I'm never going to get those other skills if I don't work on them. So
No, but yeah, I guess it is always that case of like, again, as you kind of design for a while, you kind of like, you're like, oh, what's it going, like you see like the group of like item creators, and you're like, oh, that looks fun. I'm gonna dip my toe in the item pool, and then and that's what I think I've kind of said before is what I like about adventures is the fact that it kind of touches a little bit on everything, because you get to do a little bit of monster design. You kind of like you get to be greedy and go, oh, I want some of this. One last question about like I want to ask a little bit about adventuring, and also a little bit more about like subclass design or just player options. In chatting to a lot of sort of people who kind of worked with like subclasses as kind of like their priority before, they have like a number of sort of like spreadsheets and tools to kind of help establish balance. I'm curious if you have any sort of similar tools, or like how do you achieve balance? Is that
I love this question because the answer is I don't do anything.
Whoa.
Like I just I mean there's a way in which, because I don't do anything, and I almost never look for feedback on anything. And so people are gonna think I'm like an idiot, or I don't know, but so I don't do anything because nobody who reads what I'm doing or who plays what I'm doing is doing the math, or like there is, but that's like 0.1% of those people. And it doesn't matter. My experience is that I've written things that were like, I did all the math and I knew it was perfectly balanced, and people were like, oh, this is busted. Oh, no one would ever use this.
Yeah.
So the perception of balance is completely separate from whether or not something actually is balanced.
Yeah.
So if you write to what's actually balanced, but nobody thinks it is, then what was the point of doing all that work when people think it's busted or it's not? So if I've got an idea in my head about like the way something's going to work, I'll do a little bit of research of like, what are other classes doing at this level, or what are other archetypes doing at this level? Does this feel out of bounds for this to be doing that? So that's, I mean, and then that's it, because game balance is not a math thing. People want to believe it is. It would be easier if it was, but it's not, and it's a lot about perception. So
no, I think you do raise a really good point, because I think most tables, by the virtue of just like they do kind of self-balance, and stuff like that, and it falls so much to like the the DM's discretion, because again, if you are creating, like, take the Pugilist example, if you are running into encounter after encounter of ranged flying enemies, right, the Pugilist is going to be like, what am I doing here? And on the vice versa, and so it's. Yeah, and I feel like any sort of player who's, again, at least semi-decent, if they realize like, oh, I'm doing 4 times the damage of any other player, and it is kind of, making some problems, they would probably be like, I'm going to maybe not play as optimally as, or, have conversations with the DM or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, also there's such a huge range of what can happen in the game already that like, I don't feel obligated to make like a not good option. Actually, I don't know. I kind of lost my entire train of thought there. There's there are builds in the game that are already kind of broken, and so my feeling is that if I'm not going that far, then it's fine. Yeah. Like if you can already do something that's significantly worse, why do I care if it's kind of bad when there's a really bad option?
No, that's a really good way of looking at it. It's I suppose again, there's always a good amount of like, you can tell like on paper if something like a first level ability is like, oh, you are now immune to all damage, or it's like there is clearly like things that are just like way off the spectrum, but as long as you're within that, it's kind of like that middle range of like what other classes can do. And I think at least in the kind of the few times I've dipped my toes into sort of subclass design, it is very much like I'm looking across all sort of subclasses of the same, of the same. I'm looking at all the colleges of bards and going, okay, well, this could do this, this could do this. This kind of feels, kind of in the middle. No, really interesting. And my second question is, so again, that is the player options side then. You mentioned that so for the Kobold Queen adventure that you did a fair bit of research around like looking around adventures. I'm always curious about how you came to a structure of adventure that you liked, or kind of like what your research process was exactly, because there's so many different ways to write an adventure.
So the thing I always am going to go to first are the official books, because I think generally that's what people are comfortable with, is the format of the books. So I look for things published by Wizards, and I take as much as I can from that. I was doing, some odd things with Keep of the Kobold Queen, so I had to adapt those, some of those things. But then I also follow MT Black, for instance, on Twitter, and just generally, his blog posts and stuff. So I knew box text was a heated debate, so I knew to think very carefully about kind of how to include it and when to include it and what not to include in it. And then, I did make some decisions that I don't know if it contributed to anybody liking or not liking the adventure, but for instance, I didn't include dimensions in rooms because it was a cave, first of all. So it was I don't know how to really include dimensions that doesn't feel very artificial then. But then also it's make it as big or as small as you want. You're the DM. What does it matter if I tell you it's 30 by 30 or you say it's 40 by 30? It matters not at all.
I suppose again in the case of where I've come around to the idea that with the adventure you don't need a map for everything,
right?
And there are some encounters that definitely benefit from a map, especially if there's vertical height. But I said a cavern and stuff like that, you could you can draw as many jagged walls as you want. It can be any shape, and you still kind of get the same general gist of things.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, interesting. So I guess was there any sort of particular hardcover book that you kind of tried to, shape the event around that you kind of?
No, nothing that it was really based off of. I mean, my I can't recall what was out at that time, but I think I don't buy many hardcover adventures because, like I said, I've never run one.
Yeah,
I certainly wouldn't run one of the whole campaign books they have, even though I love Ravenloft and I'd love to play in or run Curse of Strahd. I suspect that will never happen for me. Maybe I'll play in it, but I'll never run it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was looking at Curse of Strahd. I mean, for me, the other really important thing was to emulate JRPG kind of, I don't want to say not themes, but I really wanted stuff that was recognizably from JRPGs to show up in the adventure. So, there's little side quests that you don't even have to leave the village for before you go to the thing. There's crystals that you put in objects to unlock powers.
Yeah, there's all the distinct tropes and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The tropes. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. Yeah. There's even a hidden summon in the game. So you don't necessarily find it by completing the adventure, but if you do and you beat this thing, you can summon it just like you would summon something in Final Fantasy. Yeah.
So I guess so. Was it just a case of those games were very informative in your thought that you just kind of wanted to recreate it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I adore JRPGs. I will play any JRPG, and it doesn't the story could be good or the story cannot be good. That's all fine by me. I just kind of like doing it. I like it as a format. Yeah, I don't know. So it's just a deep love of that genre. I mean, I'd really love to write a whole tabletop game for it, but kind of dipping my toes into D&D by way of, or JRPGs by way of D&D was a good kind of starting point.
Yeah, it's kind of it's sort of starting to sate that curiosity by just using an existing system rather than going out of your way to create a whole.
Yeah. And I can't tell you how awesome it was to find pixel artists and hire them to do pixel art. That was just really cool. I work with a lot of artists, to get art for my stuff, but going into pixel art was really fun. And also, I mean, some of the art in the book is mine, which pixel art is the only thing I'll ever be able to do art for in one of my books. So that was fun too.
Yeah, dude. I used to do a fair bit of pixel art in my old days. I was actually, excuse me for a small tangent. But I was part of an old forum called Pixel Wars, which essentially was people who would you would draw pixel armies, and then it was essentially play by post of you have like a map,
incredible.
you put your pixels on it, they put their pixels on it, and then jeez, I don't think it exists
That
anymore.
sounds really fun.
Yeah, it was but then there were people who would just have incredible pixel art. And my starting view,
right?
They weren't very great. I think they were ninja orbs, just robots and stuff. It's pretty bad. But that's young me. I can sort of excuse that. So I guess talking more broadly then about kind of everything that you kind of do then. Is there like a favorite part of the project that you have?
I don't know. I kind of enjoy everything in its own time over the course of a project. I mean, there's something enjoyable at the start of like all the potential things that this could turn out to be, or how good it might turn out. In the middle, when you've got a lot of work done and you feel satisfied with that, and then there's still some room to make things when it's over and you're like, thank God this is done. When you publish it and it's fun to see sales happen. I guess you asked for most favorite parts.
No, I think that by means like that's my next. But if the whole thing is just, I love it.
So,
it's all great.
So I love it all, and then my least favorite part is like 1 week after I release something, when I'm like, oh my God, it's been like months since I released something, and I don't know why my brain does that, but like literally 1 week after I release something, I'm already feeling anxious about when am I going to release something else because it's been so long. It's been like 7 days, and like. Less than half the people who are going to buy whatever I put out have bought it, and I'm still stressed about the next thing.
Yeah, it is always that case of like, you do all the promo and you kind of like the release is out, and then you kind of continue it for that week afterwards. But then after that point, it's a bit like I do need to start doing something else. And again, I need to keep this to get a treadmill going, because if I stop, everything just disappears. No, it just I don't know if there necessarily is like a solution to that. I think that's just a perpetual state that we're just So I guess so. Is there I don't know that I must be it's always funny hearing about like people's like favorite part, because there are certain things that people kind of gravitate towards. I think you might be one of the first to just say I love it all. It's all great.
I mean, I do enjoy it all. I mean, I often also like to have multiple projects going, just so I can be in different places in each project. And when I'm in the mood to be starting something, I've got that. And when I'm in the mood to be finishing something, I've got that.
So actually, I was gonna talk a little bit about some of the kind of larger collaborations that you've kind of done. I guess I don't know. I guess kind of more broadly, is there any kind of I guess project management tips? Or just like things that you've kind of learned that kind of like from a solo project to like one of the larger collaborations?
Well, I think first of all, I think I have a lot of room to grow in project management. I'm actually just starting a new project that's we're going to be recruiting a number of people to do, but I've got a lot of room to grow. So I would say this is advice for like super baby project managers, and something that's going to be like, this is basic stuff to anybody who's done it before. But I think it's really important. The before you even start part is the most important part, I think, of project management. Like getting everything written and clear, getting expectations, down on paper. I think in one project I had somebody who I told everybody at the start, like, we're using kind of free art, or find art and buy it yourself, but like we don't have an art budget for this, or like I'm buying some cover art or whatever, but everything else you're on your own, or and then at the end of the project, somebody said to me, somebody made it, or it was clear that this person did not have any art and didn't really know what the plan had been for art. I think that might have been just that person's misinterpretation, because everybody else seemed to get it. But things like that, things like providing a written template so that you don't have everybody doing it slightly differently. And then at the end, like if you've got like 50 entries and you've suddenly got to go from like the slightly different variations of like, how do people write ability checks? Oh my God.
You touched on a really good point. I want to grab is like some of the projects that I've joined where I haven't necessarily been given a template. They scare me, because I'm immediately like, I like, because the last thing you want is like you without a template, you write in what you think is the best style.
Yeah.
And that is, again, maybe 7 out of 10 times it's going to be slightly different between people and stuff like that. It's and especially if you're like, okay, well, I'll just use the hardcover books as like inspiration.
Yeah.
They're not always consistent.
Yeah. You guys decide which hardcover book then you're gonna use, or what time in 5th edition you're gonna use. Yeah.
But no, you make a really good point of the kind of, I guess, the prep and legwork you kind of do before bringing people onto the project is kind of like the best way to kind of smooth over any sort of bumps.
And I think putting it in writing, like everything about the project that you can put in writing, so that everybody can look at it and knows what it is. Obviously, people might still not look at it or not read it closely, and then there's going to be a problem later. But yeah.
No, fair. No, yeah, thank you. Again, that was like more of a tangential question, but yeah, I'm always curious about like to hear, because again, project management is something of like a huge undertaking.
It is, yeah. It's a completely, it's its own thing, and like, yeah, I feel like for me, I've got to have, with this next project, my plan is to get the project started, do all my writing, and then transition back to being a project manager for the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like, just because I can't do both of those roles at the same time.
I mean, again, it's the reason why people hire project managers, and that's what they do.
I know. I've honestly considered maybe trying to just do some project management just to build up those skills, so it feels less painful to try to juggle them. But
I was gonna say, it's very much like like almost like a Jeff Stevens-esque model of the way that he goes about it. It seems to be going quite well. Then moving away from project management, then again back to your design process as we zigzag through all the topics. Through everything you've kind of done, is there like a design choice that you've kind of made that you're like particularly proud of, or like, you know, something you go, that's good design. I can pat myself on the back for that.
I'm always unreasonably proud of wordplay that I get into my products. So like God, I use that word again. I mean, that's what they are. Anyway.
I get it.
So anytime I get like some turn of phrase or really goofy just bit of wordplay into something, I'm very proud.
So is there one that like jumps to mind immediately, not to put you on the spot or anything?
Not really. I mean, I'm sure that if you like did word scrambles on a lot of the names I put in Keep of the Kobold Queen, you'd find like all sorts of references to different things. And I was really happy in particular with the Pugilist with a lot of the feature names. I was amazed and happy about like how many different like colorful phrases there are related to fist fighting or being a fist fighter. So yeah, I mean, that's where it feels like play to me. The word part is where it starts to feel like play to me. There are some like game design pieces that that I guess I'm proud of, but those are kind of very much like, oh, I thought that idea was really... Actually, no. I will say one piece of game design that I really liked, and that's that I've been playing a lot recently with... This is a very specific thing, with mechanics where you get a pool of temporary hit points, and while you have that pool of temporary hit points, there's all these other buffs that you have.
Yeah.
But as soon as you lose the temporary hit points, the buffs are gone. So it creates this fun kind of state of play where, like, no matter what, getting that is a good thing for you because now you got temporary hit points. But then there's also a good reason to try to not get hurt because there's all these other things happening.
Yeah, like a what is it? Is it Armor of Agathis type effect?
Yes. Yeah. But so I like have leaned pretty heavily into that. I probably actually need to ease off the gas with that mechanic a little bit because soon it's going to be in like everything I write. But yeah.
It's a cool mechanic because again it allows people again it's a case of like people kind of like long-term effects. I always feel bad anytime you have like a spellcaster try and do something during their turn, and then it's like, oh, they made their saving throw, and then they're just like, oh, I guess I'm done then. And those sort of like those sort of mechanics are like, as long as I can keep myself safe and I have this temple health, I get to do all sorts of cool stuff. What were some of the effects like while they had temp health?
Well, I had one that I wrote recently for something that's being published by another person, where you become kind of like instead of dying, you get reduced to 1 hit point and then get a boatload of temporary hit points, and like you're like spectral while that happens, so you can fly, you have resistance to damage from weapons, and I think you can phase through walls and people and stuff.
That's
so it just, I mean, what I really like about it is almost like it borrows that JRPG idea of like phases in fights, where like, well, this is the phase where I have this pool of hit points, I can do all these things, then you beat me out of that and now I'm back to this or whatever else.
Oh, that's even cooler, because the instant application is like, it's really cool for a player to use, but just throw it on a boss. And then no, I like that spectral idea of like, I like the idea that you literally knock someone out and then their spirit just leaves their body going, I'm ready, I'm still fighting. Also, like, talking about the pugilism wordplay, did you get fisticuffs in there somewhere?
You have a fisticuffs die instead of the martial arts die. It's your fisticuffs die.
That by far that's my favorite term for fighting or brawling. No, awesome. And I also, again, I thank you for going into like the nitty gritty design choices and stuff like that, because those are cool. And at the very least, I feel like 1 or 2 people listening is probably gonna borrow,
borrow, steal, whatever you like away.
Well, it's like imitation is the highest form of flattery, and great eye steal, all those, all those sayings to kind of validate why.
And there's nothing new under the sun. I mean, like, everything you write, everything I've done is certainly informed by everything else. So I mean,
I outsource all my writing to like 1,000 monkeys. So which and that probably explains why I haven't released anything in a while, but we're getting there. We're getting some breakthroughs. Then, so I guess talking about breakthroughs, is there like across again since your time in Reddit and all kind of before that, is there any sort of particular lesson that you kind of wish you'd learned just a little bit earlier, or?
Well, I mean, I learned fairly quickly not to engage with trolls and to separate like criticism from trolling, because I did engage with it a little bit really early on, and not only do even really obvious trolls, not only do people rally around really obvious trolls if you respond to them as a creator, but also like just internally, it's kind of gross experience for you. So there's that. I think the other thing is something we kind of talked about earlier, where it's like, I really stayed away from those things that I thought were weaknesses of mine for a long time, like adventure, not necessarily adventure design, because I've done that a lot, but putting it to paper, like putting it in a form where other people can run it. Like, I'd really like to be better at writing fiction now, and all of the kind of like narrative setting for different projects, and that's something that I'm okay at, but I'd like to be better at it, and so I wish I would have started that sooner.
No, I suppose it's always that case of like it's building, you kind of build up competence and confidence in one area that allows you to kind of almost siphon some of that confidence in other areas of like, I've got this, fine, I could probably handle that now. I'm curious then, so is it the case of in your home game and stuff like that, you kind of mentioned that it's all mostly kind of like your own setting, not using any sort of hardcover books. Is it like a forever DM sort of deal?
Yes, although in my case it's very much that's how I like it. Being a player is fine. It's okay. But I love being a DM. I mean, and part of that is because at least half of my favorite thing about playing D&D is the stuff that you do when you're not playing D&D. So like, I mean, I've got a homebrew setting or my own campaign setting, and it's fun to just write a ton about that or to think a ton about that. And if you're just playing a character, I guess I could think about backstory for him or something, but who cares about that?
So I guess, have you had any cases where obviously players at your table are using your own subclasses? or like classes?
Yes, I have, and it's starting to happen with like more regularity. It's starting to become like uncommon for me to play to run a game where people aren't playing something that
Yeah.
I done. Actually, recently I started a new campaign just a few nights ago, and I think like except for one person, everybody's playing either a race or a class or a subclass
Yeah.
that I wrote or was in something I published. Um, I had a weird feeling about that. Like one part of it is like this feels a little too insular, maybe. Um, but you know,
Also, I mean,
also
also it's really cool. I mean,
yeah,
that's got to be like I
it's
imagine
cool,
well
and I
with
feel proud.
yeah, because with your own setting, I imagine you have a number of like races kind of unique to
Yeah,
that setting. So it just makes sense. It's it kind of
yeah,
helps build the world.
yeah.
I actually again we haven't really spoken too much about like the sort of like races or options stuff like that. And again, any ones that you're particularly proud of, or you think are like worth taking a cheeky peek at?
The Grimalkin were a big hit. Have always been a big hit at my table. They're like little cat people from either the Feywild or the Shadowfell, depending upon. Well, actually, I don't think I make a distinction in the race. There's no sub races, but in the fluff,
How little are we talking? Like halfling hit little, or like
halfling.
that's adorable.
And so they're like house cats. They're like instead of like the tabaxi are like big cat humanoids.
Yeah.
These are like house cat humanoids. Um, and the idea was that some of them lived in the Feywild, some of them lived in the Shadowfell, but they had this big prank war and got kicked out of both, and so now they have to live in the material plane because nobody wants them anywhere else. And that's been a big hit at my table. There's like pretty generally there's a Grimalkin in the game. So there's that, but my favorite race is probably the Saurians that I wrote, which just because I love dinosaurs and
yeah, I was going to say just by hearing the name, I'm like, oh, there's a sort of lizardy dino.
yeah, the dino people with like a caste society based on what kind of dinosaur um you're like, I guess.
Ancestry or
Whatever, however you would put that. I have a fantasy someday of doing another TTRPG that's around kind of early Bronze Age, late Stone Age, where dinosaur people are the bad guys, and so. Nice. But for now, I'm going to live with. I'm happy, and I think it's cool that I've got dinosaur people in D&D.
I think what is the case of like with your home setting, you just each like week by week you just introduce something slightly more prehistoric, like like as you get further and further out from civilization. Oh no, we're suddenly in the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. No, so then I guess to pivot slightly towards looking to the kind of the future and everything. You again, looking at your catalog of products. There's a good number of them. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have like a sort of like a dream project, or something to kind of? You kind of mentioned as well. You've got like the JRPG thing. You've got like the dino setting.
Yeah.
You've got...
I've got probably like a dozen dream projects. Yeah. I mean, one thing I'd like to get better at, maybe this is what I should have said in terms of when I'm looking back at things. One thing that I want to get better at is not waiting till I feel like I can do something perfectly to start it. Mm-hmm. I have a bad habit of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so there are a lot of dream projects that I just have never started because I'm like, I don't think I could execute it perfectly yet. And it might never happen then if I'm waiting on that.
So, no, sorry, go ahead.
But I think rather than dithering, your question was, do I like what are my dream projects?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. If you want to shout, I get it. It's always a case of like I feel bad asking people about their dream project because it's a case of like if I talk about it, then it's out there.
Like, I mean, there's two things. Somebody else might take it and run with it, in which case, good, it got written, whether it was by me or not. And if they don't, maybe there's some kind of accountability, or somebody will come say, "Hey, you talked about this, and I love that idea. Are you going to do it?"
Yeah.
Both of those are good outcomes for me. So a D&D one that I've wanted to do for a long time is something like a directory of demi-planes, where I just have a bunch of like weird, goofy. Not necessarily goofy, but it would include goofy.
Yeah.
Demi-plane ideas that are all just kind of like, you could drop it into a campaign really easily, or also it could be the theme of your whole campaign is just hopping from one demiplane to another.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of monsters written and most of the fiction written for one demiplane, and it's just been sitting there in a folder for like 3 or 4 years.
What's like the high concept for that demiplane?
The para-elemental plane of alcohol. So it's a mad. I guess I shouldn't say mad.
A brewmaster
A
gone
dwarf. A dwarf brewmaster. Kind of has their own kind of methodology of becoming a lich, and it involves soaking their body in alcohol, mummifying themselves in alcohol, basically, and then they create the para-elemental plane of alcohol, sort of to wreak vengeance on their family.
That is I do love the fact that like the moment you get into the high tier stuff of like wizards can just create their own demiplanes, you can do anything. Like there is nothing holding you back. And the idea of a dwarf pickling themselves in alcohol, essentially, that's a really cool idea.
Yeah. And I've run actually an adventure on multiple occasions that uses all the material from that, but just it's not in a format where I could put it out there yet. I might at some point just sell it as its own thing instead of like as a whole series of them, just because it's a fun idea and other people should see it.
I'm always on the fence about like sometimes it is if there is that natural urge for products to like rather than have like a smaller project. There was actually go a little bit bigger to be like it's not one demiplane, here's 20, and stuff. And I guess it's that case of like it's the shotgun effect. But I don't know. It's always that case of like, I'm almost curious to see how those smaller products kind of do and stuff like that. It's a contained experience. Like I imagine it sounds like enough there to be like an adventure, story hooks in itself. But damn. Now I want to write some demiplanes. I think I had the chance to write one before, so I wrote a for the weird stuff I found in the dungeon, or so it's by Isaac May. I did I have seen that. I did a compliment because one of the artifacts within that thing there was essentially a Senok sphere, which is a demiplane in an item. So I created that demiplane, which essentially is like an evil dungeon of just like it's a murder dungeon. That's kind of what it is. It's like that. And that was kind of the cool to have fun with. But now there's so many different directions you can kind of go with that. I had something that I did want to ask, but I've lost it in the Dwarven Brewmaster chat. So hopefully it will come back to me. I think it was something about So with everything that you've kind of done so far, is there anything that you haven't touched? Like there's a side of design that you haven't like done anything towards that you kind of think that would be cool to try?
Well, so there's publishing a whole new system, which is definitely something that I'd like to do. There's publishing a whole new system, which kind of goes hand in hand with getting better at being a project manager. I mean, like I do think it would be fun at this point in my career to start doing more like helping other people develop the skills and also kind of allowing to myself to not have complete control over things. Like I've seen a few books, I'm not going to name names because this is kind of a double-edged comment here. I've seen a few books that are published by one person that I adore. Like they're fantastic. But if there had just been a couple other people on there, I think some of the weird things that slipped through wouldn't have, because it wouldn't have been someone's singular vision that where they just all their blind spots. It made it, stuff made it past all their blind spots.
I guess that is the benefit of all these sort of collaborations is you kind of, again, the end result is an amalgamation of everyone's different ideas, and it's 9 times out of 10 it's better for it because you kind of cover for each other. That's fair. And creating a whole new system is yeah, I haven't even got thoughts or dreams to tackle that just yet. I think, come back to me in a year, and then maybe we'll talk.
I mean, there's the thing about that is that, like, you do it because you want to, not because it's going to be worth doing, because it almost certainly won't be worth doing.
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to do those things, but then I think, like, yeah, but I could spend like a quarter of that time writing something for D&D, and it'll make a ton more money than doing that ever will. So
yeah, at least that's the current the world we live in at the moment.
Yeah.
Speaking about, I guess, well, as I say, speaking about the world in which we're in, which is up there in one of my worst segues. But the community as a whole, talking about like collaborations and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of mentioned for a few projects you've kind of been working closely with some people. Is there anyone in the DMsGuild or surrounding community that like particularly inspires you that you kind of want to?
This is a real punt, but but honestly, the community in general, I think, is pretty inspiring. It's full of a lot of, I mean, it's a diverse set of people. It's a people who I find have a lot of passion for making the world a better place, like beyond just the thing that we're all passionate about, which is the game and the fantasy and all that. It's a lot of people who are working really hard to make the game inclusive, and for the game to be ahead of the cultural curve instead of behind it. So I admire all of that, and I don't think I could pull out one or two people specifically, because that's really like a component of our community, in a broad stroke. As a less punty answer, MT Black, we don't talk often, but we do talk, and I would say I kind of see him as a mentor. He's somebody who I think has been very savvy about his release schedule and the way he approaches the business side of this. So I'm always kind of looking to him for cues for how to adapt, because I think we probably all have come into this from the perspective of, I love doing this and I want to do it, and there's a way I can make money at it, and not from like a business side of it of like, that's not been the. And so I look to him for kind of my cues about like what I should be doing next or how I should be thinking about stuff.
Also, for most of us, it's like you've kind of joined and dipped your toes within the DMsGuild or writing, and MT Black has already been at it for years. So it's like, okay, yeah, we can sort of their trajectory and all the experience they have is that like, again, their blog posts are always super insightful about just any sort of chance to kind of peel back on the, like, not, I guess, the upper end of the industry. I guess.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've had some experiences recently that have helped me understand that the upper end of the industry is pretty low. I mean, I'll just say that as a DMsGuild writer, I'm not making a far cry from what people who are doing this full time are doing. And that was a surprise, and that also helps me, or not helps me, but that also makes me think it's even more important to develop some business acumen around this, so that I can do the projects that I want to do and the projects that make me money, and
bounce between the two.
Yeah, exactly.
No, awesome. Yeah, it always is the case. Yeah, 100%. I agree. It's fantastic. I guess kind of looking at the time, we've managed to kind of natter away.
All right.
Again, time flies. One thing I do want to get in there is what are some of the exciting stuff that you're working on, with an asterisk, because where can we hear about that? Because that's kind of the slightly more important part.
Yep. So right now I'm doing a few collaborations off the guild. I'm doing some more work for Ghostfire Games, and I did quite a bit of their Grim Hollow Player's Guide. They've got more books upcoming, and I'm working on those. I'm also in touch with the boys at Mage Hand Press, talking about stuff for them. And then I've got the finale to the complete handbook series that I'm working on with Ross, and that's the one I'm kind of still building my pool of other writers for. And that's going to be a big thing. I'm excited about that. And then after that, it's starting to shift off the guild and publishing, selling stuff on my site directly, or on DriveThruRPG or wherever else.
How are you feeling about essentially the last part of like a huge series?
I have mixed feelings, I mean, there's a part of it that I just want to be like, let's just blow the scope up bigger and bigger and bigger and add this and this and this and then until like it would become like impossible to actually finish. And then there's a part of that's like a relief, and then I'm sure there'll be a part of like me that grieves when it's all over too.
Yeah. It's sweet and salty at the same time. And where some of the places, obviously you've got your website, and
so you can go to sterlingvermin.com to kind of follow the blog, and soon hopefully there'll be a new website up there that looks a lot better and doesn't look like somebody's like Angel Fire website from the 1990s. And I'm also really active on Twitter, also at Sterling Vermin. But then I've also got a subreddit and a Facebook page and a Patreon. So you can find me wherever internets are sold.
There will be a bundle of links in the description, and you can just pick one at random, click it, and now they probably all link to each other as well. It's like
they do, yes. Anywhere you go, you'll find the rest of them by virtue. Yeah.
Well, honestly, Benjamin, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a blast. No, it's been so insightful, especially with someone who's who's been around for as long as you have, and I was worried that may come across as well.
I mean, it's also funny because we're talking about 5 years, which is okay, that's a while, I guess.
Yeah.
But it is kind of ancient in DMsGuild terms.
It's like the ancient eons ago. Years and years ago before anyone could remember. But no, thank you. Sorry, that's the worst way to end this. Is like, let me just get that insult in quickly.
No, it's good. It's good. I like it.
Thank you so much. And there will be links to everything in the description. If you don't mind, I've got some stuff that I need to plug quickly.
Absolutely.
Currently, I have March is a busy month for me because I have 2 Kickstarters I'm involved in currently going right now. So there is the Diesel, which is a sort of new RPG system, which is all based on sort of Firefly in sort of like a punky Western setting that I did like a lot of some narrative writing for, as well as the Cities of Myth. The Atlantis, which is essentially we have desert on one side, we have ocean on the other. So chances are, whatever you like, there is something for you. So links to both those live Kickstarters are in the description, and any sort of backing would be greatly appreciated. Otherwise, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. And to round things off, Benjamin, my final question then is: how do you end a podcast?
Probably with some kind of musical outro.
Wow, I will. I'll find some free music, and as it fades in now, we'll just.
Find something JRPG-y.
and with that, there'll be a fade as the JRPG music just like we get quieter and quieter as the day.